I'm not going to blame Lewis. If things were normal, I wouldn't have been even battling with Lewis. I'd have been battling with Kimi and Max.
George Russell has finally broken his silence after Mercedes confirmed that his car suffered a software bug during the Belgian Grand Prix. George Russell, angry at Toto Wolff. The revelation has sparked fresh questions about Russell's relationship with his team boss. Before the race, Russell had claimed there was a difference between his car and Kimi Antonelli's, insisting Kimi's car felt better. Mercedes were initially dismissive of those concerns, and Russell was essentially told to focus on his own performance instead of comparing machinery. Now, with Mercedes officially admitting that Russell's car suffered a software issue during the race, fans are asking whether he had every right to be frustrated after his concerns were brushed aside. Has this created tension inside Mercedes? And what does it mean for Russell's future with the team? Let's break down everything that happened. It lights out at the Belgian Grand Prix, and within seconds something is already wrong. George Russell gets swallowed up by the pack off the line. Cars that should be behind him are suddenly alongside him, then ahead of him. By the time the field reaches the climb up to Eau Rouge, Russell is fighting just to hold position, not for the win, not for a podium, just to stay out of trouble. That fight puts him wheel to wheel with his former teammate, Lewis Hamilton, now driving for Ferrari. At turn 5, Russell goes for the outside line. He clips Hamilton's front left tire. His Mercedes is launched into the gravel trap, and his race is over on lap 1. Hamilton is handed a 5-second penalty for his part in the clash. But for Russell, a penalty for someone else doesn't undo a DNF. His race, and potentially a chunk of his championship hopes, ended in the gravel at Spa. Straight after the crash, in the media pen, Russell didn't hold back. He said plainly that he wouldn't have even been in that fight with Hamilton if his car hadn't suffered a boost issue in the very first sector of the race. In his eyes, this wasn't a driving error. It was a car that let him down before he'd even had a chance to race. Here's what makes this story so explosive. Russell wasn't just complaining after the crash. He'd been complaining about this all weekend, and arguably for weeks before that. Long before Spa, Russell had told Mercedes that something felt fundamentally different about his car compared to Antonelli's, particularly in a straight line. He wasn't vague about it either. He pointed to specific, measurable gaps in speed and energy deployment on multiple laps across multiple sessions. And how was that message received? According to Russell himself, and to reporting from inside the paddock, Mercedes' initial response was to point the finger back at him. The theory internally was that this was a driving style issue, that Russell simply wasn't extracting the same performance from the 2026 car that his 19-year-old teammate was. Toto Wolff publicly and privately pushed the line that both Mercedes cars were built the same, prepared the same, and delivered to the same specification. If there was a gap, the suggestion was that Russell needed to adapt, not that the car needed fixing. For a driver with Russell's a race winner, a two-time teammate of Lewis Hamilton, a driver who has led Mercedes' return to the front, being told to essentially figure it out isn't a small thing. It's a signal about where you stand in the pecking order. Fast forward to after the Belgian Grand Prix, and the story flips completely. Mercedes Deputy Technical Director Simone Resta went public and admitted that the team is still struggling to fully understand elements of the sport's new regulations. More importantly, he confirmed that Mercedes are now moving away from the driving style theory entirely. The real explanation: a software issue tied to the harvesting limit right at the start of the race from turn 1 through to roughly turn 5, the exact stretch where Russell lost ground and ended up fighting Hamilton for position. Resta confirmed this boost issue affected both cars on the grid, Russell's and Antonelli's. Here's the twist that's fueling all the frustration. Antonelli suffered the same issue and still went on to win the race. Russell suffered it, and it contributed directly to a first-lap DNF, so the same software bug produced two completely different outcomes: a race win for one driver, a wall of gravel for the other, and it's a bug that Russell had been flagging for weeks, only to be told the difference was down to him. This is where things get uncomfortable for Mercedes. If Russell's complaints had been taken seriously earlier in the season, would this bug have been caught and fixed before Spa? That's the question a lot of fans are now asking, and it's not an easy one for Wolff to answer. Antonelli now holds a 50-point lead over Russell in the championship, and Hamilton has leapfrogged Russell into second place in the standings, all shaped, at least in part, by a technical issue Mercedes is only now admitting was real. For Russell, that's a bitter pill. It's one thing to lose ground to a rookie teammate who's simply driving brilliantly. It's another to lose ground because of a fault in your own machinery that management spent weeks attributing to you. There's no confirmed public blow-up between Russell and Wolff, no shouting match, no ultimatum. But the dynamic speaks for itself. A driver whose concerns were dismissed has now been vindicated by his own team's engineering department. That's the kind of moment that either builds trust going forward because the team owned the mistake or quietly erodes it because it shows how long a legitimate concern can go unaddressed at the highest level of the sport. With the Hungarian Grand Prix up next, all eyes will be on two things. First, does Mercedes actually fix the issue? Resta's comments suggest this stems from the team's difficulty fully understanding the new for 2026 power unit and energy deployment rules, not a simple patch. If the bug reappears in Hungary or beyond, that's a much bigger story about Mercedes' grip on this regulation set. Second, how does Russell respond, both on track and in how he talks about his team going forward? A driver who's just been proven right after being doubted often drives with something to prove. Whether that shows up as clean, controlled performances or as visible frustration boiling over in future press conferences is worth watching closely. And longer term, this incident becomes part of the file on Russell's future at Mercedes. Contract talks, team orders, resource allocation between him and Antonelli, all of it now sits under the shadow of a season where the team's own engineering department admitted it got something wrong at Russell's expense. So to sum it up, George Russell complained about a car problem for weeks. Mercedes initially blamed his driving. Then a crash at Spa ended his race. And only after all of that did the team admit he'd been right the whole time. Whether this becomes a genuine turning point in Russell's relationship with Toto Wolff, or just another chapter in a difficult season, we'll start finding out this weekend in Hungary. If you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure to like this video, subscribe for more F1 news and analysis. And drop a comment below. Do you think Russell has every right to be frustrated with Mercedes? Let me know what you think. Thanks for watching and I'll see you in the next one.